I'm super bummed that I don't get to be with you guys today, but we'll be back together before you know it. So hopefully your substitute has told you that all of the things that you need today are in Canvas. So you should be seeing on your screen right now my homepage for this class. If I just highlight over here to the left, you should see a date for the last time, well, if you're 1A, the last time we were together, so the 24th, and then the day that I have you today, which for an A day would be the 26th. If I have you a B day, then this is going to say 25 and 27. So you're going to just expand the date that you should be in my class, and you're going to, the first several things that you see are videos that I need you to watch. Now, always when you get into Canvas, watch the videos in the order that I have them listed. So the first thing that I need you to do is watch this grading video. So hopefully you've already done that by now because you guys just went through and did the links as you saw them. But if you did not, go back up and watch the grading video before you finish watching this video. Then next up, we're going to group. We're going to talk about the cards that I gave you last time. So they're these cards. I gave them to you while we were watching videos. We're going to talk about what we're supposed to do with these cards. Then the next thing that we're going to do is, sorry about that, guys. Do our first lesson together, and the substitute should have given you the papers for that lesson. At the end of the lesson, there's some practice problems that I want you to try, and then after you do those practice problems, you're going to come to this next video and watch the solutions just to verify that you understand what we went over in class. Whether or not you have time to get the practice problems done, you need to come and watch the solutions for those practice problems. So if you don't have enough time to watch all of the videos today, you're going to have to finish watching them at home. Then the last thing that is on your list of videos to watch is the button assignment. So I gave you one other slip of paper while you guys were watching videos last time, and it looks something like this. I'm going to go over what this paper was for. So at the very bottom of the module is all of the files or the papers that you would need to print if you're distance learning. So the first things will always be the video lessons that you need to watch, and then the bottom will always be the papers that go with them. Okay, with that all being said, let's just jump right in and get going on the task for this video. So like I said, last time I gave you this set of cards. I'm going to move myself to the top left so that I'm not just partying in the middle of your screen for this whole video. If you forgot to bring these back, there should be enough extras on the table by my big whiteboard for you to take another set. I don't typically make enough extras for you guys to have another one if you lose your work. So just make sure that you're keeping track of things. But this time I should have enough extra sets that you can grab one if you don't have yours. So I'm going to unclip these, and the task for this for these cards is to separate them into two groups. So you're going to lay them all out. You're going to look at the information on them, and you're going to try to separate them into two groups based on a good reason. So I already have mine separated into two groups. So what I did was I took all of the graphs that have a rectangle shape in them, and I put them in one group. And then down here are all of the graphs that don't have a rectangle shape. So spoiler alert, this is not the best way to group these graphs. You're going to want to have a more meaningful reason than that. You want to look beyond the shapes and look at what the graphs are telling you. Now, even if you don't understand how to read the graph, you can at least look at the heading of the graph or the information on the graph and see if there is a logical or a good reason to separate these into two groups. And like I said, like putting them according to shape is not, I would say, not a good enough reason to separate them. So before I stop talking and let you do that, I just want to mention one more thing. So for most of you, I'm betting that you haven't seen this kind of graph before. This guy is called a segmented bar graph. Now, I just want to use him as an example of how you could not know what this graph is, but still be able to deduce what this information is about. So up here, this is telling you that the different sections of each bar have to do with whether or not there is a cell phone or has a cell phone or does not have a cell phone. So who or what does or does not have a cell phone? That is going to be down here. So of people 10 to 12 years old, it's broken it up into those that have a cell phone and those that don't. Same with 13 to 15 and 16 to 18. So even if you didn't quite know what this graph was telling you, at least you know that this has to do with 3 different age groups and how many of them have a cell phone or don't have a cell phone. So I want you to take as much time as you need. I want you to pause this video now and take as much time as you need to separate out the 2 different groups. And then come back and restart the video once you have them separated out for a good reason. Okay, so you should have your graphs in 2 groups. I'm going to zoom out now and show you these are the 2 groups that the graph should be in for the purposes that we're talking about today. So these are the 2 groups, the top group, and here is my bottom group. So now that you know what graphs go in each group, if you did not get this particular grouping, I want you to pause the video again, and I want you to see if you can figure out why these are in the groups that they're in. Now, when I say pause, like really pause, you could just keep watching and I could do the work for you, but what's going to be more meaningful is if you guys really took a second to think or to see if you can figure out why I grouped them together. Think about it as like a puzzle and not necessarily as like a math problem. So really pause the video, see if you can come up with a reason why, and then come back and we'll talk about the groupings. Okay, so these 2 groups represent what we are going to be talking about today. So today we're talking about different types of data, and there are 2 different types of data, which is why I had you separate these graphs into 2 groups. Each group represents one of the types of data that we are going to look at this year. So I'm going to start with the top row. And I'm going to explain to you why we put these together. So what I want you to notice about these groups is that this data is all described by words. So they do involve numbers, like on the pie chart, it's in percentages. And in this table, there are numbers. There's numbers on the axes here as well. But the data that we're looking at is data that can be described using words. So the easiest one to start with is the bar chart. I want you to label this that it's a bar chart because I want you to memorize what each of these graphs is called. So this guy is a bar chart. His biggest distinguishing factor is that the bars do not touch. Now, you had another one that looks similar but is different. Notice in this bottom one, the bars are touching. In a bar chart, the bars do not touch. Now, down here at the bottom, this is the data that you're looking at. So notice our data is being broken down by favorite subject, and the favorite subject is described using a word. So math, science, English, social studies, foreign language, fine arts. Now let's contrast that to this other guy that does not belong in this group. So this graph where the bars touch, this is called a histogram. This is called a histogram. The data on the histogram is tip amounts. So up here, the data is about our favorite subject, and those favorite subjects are described using words. Notice in the histogram, our data is on the tip amounts a server got while working. The tip amounts are described using numbers because when you tip somebody, you're giving them money. So you can tip $1 or $2 or $3. So the biggest difference between these two, well, there's two big differences. One, the bars are touching and the bars are not touching. Two, this is data that is being described using words. This is data that's being described using numbers. That is the distinction between the two types of data that we are going to talk about this year. We're going to have sets of data that are called categorical data, and that means they're described using words. Then you have another set of data called quantitative data, and all of that data is described using numbers. So let's go back to our first set of graphs that we grouped together. So we have the bar chart, and we're noticing the numbers, sorry, not the numbers, the words across the bottom. Another one that's really easy to see is the pie chart. So P-I, I think it might actually be P-I-E. Sorry. Pie chart. So in the pie chart, you're seeing what percentage each category is, but notice over here that this is the data that we actually looked at. So this is a data on how much of your diet should be made up of these different things. So notice the different categories are words: fruit, protein, vegetables, dairy, grains, other. I can pull just the next one that I see. So this guy is called a dot plot. Hopefully it's obvious why, because the graph is made up of dots. Now notice the description across the bottom of the graph says hours spent on homework per week. So there are words in this graph, but the data is described using numbers. So the hours spent on homework per week is described by a number. You spent 1 hour or 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours. So up here, the data is described by using words. Down here, the data is described using numbers. Okay, next up, we'll do the two-way table. Next up, we'll look at our two-way table. Remember, you should be writing the names of all of these down because I do want you to memorize the names of all of these different graphs. The first quiz that you take, the first mini quiz you take, I'm going to have you identify the names of all of the different kinds of graphs. So this two-way table is a data set that has to do with passengers on the Titanic. And what this data set is telling us is how many of the females on board lived or died, and how many of the males on board lived or died. And I'm assuming that the purpose of this data set is to see if there's more of one gender that was that survived. And if you really go in and look at it, you will see that of the women, there were 470 women. A lot of them lived. There were 1,700 males, and a lot of them died. There's a good reason for that. See if you can think about why more women survived on the Titanic than men. So hopefully you know, or you're thinking that the women were encouraged to get off first. The women and children were given the lifeboats first. So that's why, if you're looking at this data, more of the women survived that were on board than the men. And we'll get more into this later. I'm not necessarily expecting you to understand all that. The one thing that I do want you to understand is that the data is described using words. So male, female, lived, died. So even though there's numbers in the table, this is still considered a categorical variable because it's described using words. Down here, not down here, sorry. I'm going to pull another from the other group. So this guy, the phone battery comparison, is called a stem and leaf plot. This guy is called a stem and leaf plot. So this is looking at two different brands of battery, and we're investigating which one lasts longer. So we have brand A here and brand B on the right, and I'm assuming, so down here it says that these numbers are hours. So brand A's data is described using the number of hours that the battery lasted. So this data is described using numbers, not words. So this data is described using numbers, not words. This data is described using words. The data that you're looking at is gender. So I would maybe write that in. The data you're looking at is gender and survival. So gender, those are the pugs. Sorry about that. Gender is described using words. Gender is either male or female. Survival rate is described using words. Well, not survival rate. Whether they survived is described using words. Either they lived or they died. The hours a battery lasts is described using numbers. So this guy, gender, words. Hours that a battery lasts, numbers. Okay, we got one more, and that is our segmented bar graph. Segmented bar graph. And I am going to contrast that with the regular bar graph. So notice they each have rectangular bars, and they each of their bars is not touching. But the reason that this one is called a segmented bar graph is because you split the bar into two different sections or two different segments. So essentially they're giving you similar information. This one just gives you one more piece of information in the bar. So this data has to do with whether or not these different age groups have a cell phone. So the variable is has a cell phone or does not have a cell phone, or you could think about it as yes or no. Notice that those are words. The way that you're describing the data is with a word. Either you have a cell phone or you don't have a cell phone. So this is another one that's called a categorical variable. And then lastly, we have our box and whisker plots. So a box and whisker plot is, we would just look at one of them. A box and whisker plot isn't always two. This guy is a box and whisker. It's just that you have two box and whisker plots on this card. So this data has to do with the yearly salary that the employees earn in these two corporations. The yearly salary is described using dollars, thousands of dollars. So even though you have two different corporations and those have names, the data that we're looking at is a number. It's a yearly salary. So this is quantitative data. So now that we've gone through that, I'm just going to look at it one group at a time just to wrap that all up and make sure that we feel okay about the different groups. So this is one group. These are all called categorical data. And the reason why is because the variables in the data are described using words. The variables in the data are described using words. So this is group one. Group two are these four graphs, and these are all plots of quantitative data. The variables in these graphs are described using numbers. So the reason that we separated these 8 graphs into 2 separate groups is because they're 2 different kinds of data. This is categorical, this is quantitative. So maybe keep these out to the side because we're going to come back to these. We'll come back to these in the middle of the next lesson. Sorry, I was trying to figure out what I was trying to say there. So don't necessarily put these away, just slide them off to the side and we'll revisit them in a minute. So on your next video, you're gonna need these notes. So if the sub hasn't already given these to you, make sure one of you guys be super brave and say, hey, yo, we need our work. Okay, see you guys in the next one.